Yes, can we hear on this one? Okay, thank you. We do want to make sure that you have time today to prepare your final presentations. And before that, we are going to do just a brief review and also have some time for questions and answers.
다 데랭아서 동부들야 지수 년군잡라야 두스탐세는 거와 어딜라야 아니 tradi지에게 주지 두스베인스라 티마칭을라야 아니 단다바탕아 수가카리장 요메텔라야 아니 저정 치지 네 저정 치누고 제라야 드로틀라인 카리요 멜라치타게스.
Since one of the goals of our time here together is to help you prepare to teach your very own classes, we thought that it might be helpful to give you a behind-the-scenes peek at what we did as we prepared and organized for our time together this week.
단다 최초델은 좀치 정야게로와 아니 가사 무기 땅부터까지 시스템을라야 다된 맞지야 네 이야기 무기 땅부터까지 시스템을라야 최초 지 가사 다 जनरल सिस्टम वाला गिगे सिस्टम वाला या ते ट्रेडिक कंडा चिगियो मेता गिगे चि छागे ते ला ट्रेडिक चिगियो वास ते सिस्टम वाला या अने तंदा देला या त दंठान दे ना लंगा छु जनरल छे द छियो रे स्वा इमान जनरल छे ते की जाबलो ने अने को ट्रेडिक रबा मापु चि छियो वा ओ तिगी कोला या ngara नि के ट्रेडिक कंडा चियो मेते ला या अने छेसुलो ngutu ते चिगियस.
I did consider trying to make our notes very beautiful and very pretty and make sure that there were no mistakes, but I didn't do that. I decided that I would like for you to see them just in their natural state, just how they were.
다 가수 데려도 트레디치 센터 대피값이 임바나 실기 임바나 가수 리와치야라야 지 센터 야부테 노트메지 니 유지 주엘라 탑시 땅아 요르다 임바나야 땅포 센터 대피값이 더 코런 땅포 센터 대스tambal라 간다치 요메스고 왔다 나나 노트라 요파 네고게 주탈라 텐데 니 유메파게 지 땅포 코런 마지 간다노 지 요파데 루스테니 투선스.
We started out with having a very broad topic that we wanted to explore throughout the entire week. And since we wanted to teach both scientific content and also teaching techniques, we decided on these two, the living staircase, transparent teaching, and metacognition, that would sort of be a theme that would come up multiple times throughout the week.
다단다데 nga수게 담보게 저지테 저지 첨부지레스 담보게 저지테 첨부지제로와 아니 되게 제라야 nga수게 트리피캅스 다 트리피캅스 바나코 센리게 저지 체라 바단다 징이 센리게는 저지치글라 트리고 바다 저지테라 테니데테 아니 트탑라 트구스 담발라 아스타 단다 nga수게 조데라야 아니 트탑게 나네 단다가 수치세나상 트탑데타 아니 랑이랑 토스고라다 수수게 텔라야 지와텔라야 삼시지야기 때 아니 주종 예스타 데이터 이마나 아니 다 던탄데나가 순 전체 트리피캅스 양세 치출랜데 시제요레스.
On the first day, we wanted to make sure we had some time for review. It's usually good just to make sure that everyone can have a refresher and be on the same page. And then we also wanted to talk about unicellularity and multicellularity, since that would form sort of the foundation for what we would discuss for the rest of the week.
That is the Valima Tambuteranga Chiorena and Chesulaya, and also Tama ko Shongi Chipachigan, that you can ko Tessa Chipachigan Hagicheto, and a Ngomagi Junction Jugolaya, and Jarjon Tissiores, and it's how much you can call Hagi open Yagichetra, and the Jela so and a Casa Tapon Chiden and Tapon Mandanga Colaya and those Neshijayus.
For the review, we focused on genes and cells and evolution, and in particular, the parts of those courses that were going to be really helpful to keep in mind as we went through our course this year.
다 티니 녀티나가 수 가르쳐준 지오레스 담발아야 아니 리제당 타폰당 펜줄 콜라야 지오레스 저전시 지오레스 다 저전 지야대야 조디 미사데 아니 니마 담보게 제라야로 아니 니마 담보게 제라 체게 니마 카그나라 조시당 저요 주제 아니 저요 주게 단다 아니 리제당 타폰다야나 펜줄 코게 네톤 티타가라야 가서 무스케데던 두스 저전시스.
And we also wanted to review experimental design. So we started our plant experiments on that first day so that they would have some time to grow. And I can see some very nice plant growth here in this group in the front row.
That take jail in Kojala Bana Suge Zendana could check good reagi or what I check good reagi, the Yanchi or rest than Yonkonjala Suge, the sing is Sabun Tabiagi, and it toxicity drew your race, and this the Tat and the Dela Yakashim Banasation Pay Agoshishas, Toxic dig river.
All right, thank you, my friends. Thank you. Thank you. So for day 2, as Kelsey and I were sort of planning the class, we decided that it would be worthwhile to do some work with plants. Something that actually in my previous 3 years coming here, we have not even touched.
That and again, Kessela Sombanan Shinre, Delaya, and Kasanga Sutalo, Sishinka Kola, this Casa, education boost and Chichians, Nalasomban and Digangola, Lusum Chilhe or the Lusum Rinlaya, and it's the Shinka Cortilaya, and it's Lapa Machanjo in the Chadeshas.
So in order to understand photosynthesis, again, we decided that it would be important to understand the interactions in the atomic level, which is why we gave you sort of an introduction to the chemistry and how atoms behave at the molecular level.
That session on El Hopper Tanda Nasuga Ojorupa, Oga Debjutilaya, Aniko Hakueta, Tita Chitoy Chetu, Neshasulaya, and Titan Drevi, to 10 town Zinjuru Kolayan, those along 3 years.
And for the activities, I actually had to search into what I've done before with other classes back at Emory and other universities, and the 2 labs that we did, the stomata density lab and the photosynthesis lab, where you saw the leaves float up from the gas exchange, are 2 labs that we actually do with our students at Emory and other universities.
Tanda Dinane Hopper Tanda Natsugo Jordan David team by Bana. Tanda ngoma la taksi chisha juga netan tena do rios chichi paimba chiting asuge kasugre tanda longkong yo ro loma go la yo pe longkong ke manglo kanda yo meti taksi che badang senda ti bana tanda asuge kasa ane ko ojo chibe kapsu loma te chu gang la yang yong a chor wa te asuge Langzi de Juja pickups, Jirichi pickups, Kuyung Yopate, and Dusta team by now, Emory Lion Duslon Chibi Caps, Tasset the years, the Instambanga Sudela to Jones.
And those are important labs because even though photosynthesis happens at the molecular level and we can't really visualize it, we can at least visualize the product of photosynthesis and the reaction as to how it's occurring within the plant tissue. And that's what we did with our labs.
Ta chicken banner or tanda digi Nasuke Tasha need about the kitchen which Hagores, Karchin Kanaske Chabuchagors, and a chitang in Bana, and a Ojur Sadi, and a Dudugumbala Chonvik Zijuchiroas, this Tabalang Asumiki Toyata, Chisamluno Korea Capoyores, Hibana Tandang Asuka Tashi Latenico, Ojurgungu Ranta, and those Tashi Hioma, the Imbana Ojur Latenic tripping in Divutelaya, and as we devote Lateni Chonvik, the switching Hashina as to start here was. This Tambalaya, I think I saw Zender Cups and the day that Shas.
I'd also like to take a moment to mention just a little bit about the way that we organized our plan. Since we wanted to make sure we had a main teaching technique of the day, we wrote all of those, and that's what you see in the highlights here.
That the dinner near Shendakachi de la Mutuchi, and Zendragana, Karichi Triggy Imbagi, Jutun Tila, Karichi Pechutango Patizo, Nasuge de la Rada, Zenda Tripicas, Talan Karichi Metode de la and Toxerpugana Dusquasha, yes.
And since we knew that there would be 3 sessions every day, we also organized these into the main topics for the morning session 1, morning session 2, and then also the afternoon session.
That Titala, Kochibi Kapsi and Jushi Chitapa Manda Galaya, do say you actually Chokoyosa, and I saw the Shopa gets Sotan, Tampotanari, and Conjaga Sotan and do see what yes.
And here, the activity that we did where we created the clay models of embryogenesis, I actually put the link here because it is actually a published biology education activity. And so that is something that I did as we were creating this course, is I tried to look out and see what resources were already there so that we could incorporate into our class.
That under the Kapsang Asuka Cheguchi Karido resistant Balaya, Azuka Dimsangi Serprego Kolarwa, Dimsangi Serprego Kolaya, and Asuke Karsa, Korangi Pizu de Cheguchi Drio res, Pizu Zuyagi Chegu Dria Tigitasati, Bana, Negalaya, Tigi Tatode dus Shasha, yes, that is Shai Jinsanka resistant Balaya. Ani tanda ki pezu zoya ki thablante ngoma neta ko pechotan shimba chiche ni tin anshin ko pattern chi shaba chi yonchek bu yobi ki ani ko jegu namba chi chagyo res.
And then for the topics that we covered on day 3, we actually had a little bit of review of them yesterday evening as well, and that was talking about fertilization, embryogenesis, and then cell differentiation.
다 니마 심바들랑 아수고 조지 카리카리 지오레세나 카시 침바네 계산 공다다 도알랑 아수 디시션스 다 담보테 임바이나 아수 데와 사본 디조지 녀들라야 아니 카사 드린싱 차페체 아니 되게 제라야 아수 타폰 체인지를 공고 간다슨 두고요 메티 콜라야 니마 심바테 트바인스.
And since Kelsey and I wanted to also focus on systems, organ systems, we thought that it would be wise to introduce the function of neurons, which I know that is not a simple topic. It's actually quite complex, but we spent basically the 3 sessions working on it from different angles.
다 ngazuge wampuga malok ko tins tambalaya ane dela ngazugo ponti cheraba labarda ane wansa thezu ta wansa malok ko laya ngazu dus chi thes ro ashirge bana wansa thezu ta wansa mala de ane chi ajushi te nyokta sauchi yorda imbana ya tanda ge joshi te tanda ane ko nyima chi ko sotan simla dus chaguchi de te theba yins.
And again, the activity that we did where we were testing the reflexes on our bodies, it's something that you will see in other physiology classes. I also teach that class at other places, and I have done very similar labs like the one that we did in groups.
That tigi kapsi bananga suga taksha shegu kashi chidapati dongu kola lipu gane dongu mando kachika kola nga su taksha shegu driyo resra de tandanga su de la rukhoka ngur gane drichi jungo re tin anshingi ani phala yan zinda tripi kapsi bana chitangi nga su phoni rik payo ra luphongi neliku kola zinda tripi kapsi bana chegundi drikiyo res.
And then for discussing a topic such as organ systems, even when I've taught this in other settings as well, I really like to get the students involved in this since there are so many different sort of mini topics within the big idea of organ systems.
Wampu mala ko trins tambalaya wampu mala ti trivia giche tu sikurwata ko trichate hacha wampu chiores.
I usually find that for that, it tends to be a lot more interesting if everyone is actually able to sort of focus in and learn about one, and then also watch presentations from all of the other groups so that you can learn at least some about all of the organ systems.
Tati kala nga su kari pechetan yore system balaya ne ruka chita pachire mi chita pachigin baina ko wampu ko mala kang chik ko laya ta ko katsu chi jang yo pa na ti jang ti sheba chi ti ta sholaya ni shenda ga sane ya chi wampu ko mala jenda tu ko laya ni kutol haya ge dus chi yes.
And the other reason that I wanted us to have a chance to do presentations a little earlier in the week before we got to the final ones is that I usually, at least when there's time, like to allow students multiple times to practice something before they have to do it as a final assessment.
Ta nyamatele chesu thethche ge kokap chikte yore sesu ge joji chetopach kola dos chi yore sta chia ti ge jinsente karin sense tambalaya chi namje bana ngar ge janta tropi capsule hoptu solaya thama tela susu ge ta chik tamsi chembo ta ina janta chembo te matri ge ngola ya ani kola ya chi yang chi thonsen thya ta chong ga thya ge nyamnyong ti thama khashi chi la sok chi ge thapsi ti chi yes.
And oddly enough, when we were planning all our days, this was 2 months ago, we actually had thought about continuing organ systems into day 6, but the more we thought about it, it occurred to us that, why don't we end with what happens when the organs collapse and there is something abnormal about them, and that is what brought us into the topic of cancer.
Ta chigin bana ga ni ge lonseng ge talu yakka ge subject de la tati chiwa de la ya tanda ge sentri ta chango de chershi de ta ni dawa 지니 지공을 주주된다레스 다 당포데 바나 가수가 니마 투파텔라 임바나 단도 메트도 왕보고 말라고 트야콜라야 아니 지 차진다고 지 당샤유스 임바이나야 다 지라야 삼루 종스탄발라야 네 거리 삼루 종레세나 केदेस्ता वंपो माला चिला हिचन शोरपाई बना करे चिगरे से ट्वातिल है देते ने ngasuga dinner kolaya ne yamatukpati ki joshitin dinner kola shabins.
And although I heard from a couple of you about being a scary topic, and yes, it could be a bit depressing and perhaps you may get worried, it's okay to understand what cancer is because you know what? Knowledge is power, and the more we understand it, the more we can protect our bodies in case something happens to us.
다 실등기 말은 가서 dinner 코 같이 시험스탄 발라 가서데라 같이 주송 대샤스 코 셔나 사워땅 안도 사워땅 지 센터 지구의 조지 지그레스 임바이나야 야 가서그 시연 세티 코게 다 뉴바탄 야나 지 세치긴스탄 발라스 가서그 디주 시바이나 야고요레스 게테 야 지제마치를 지 총바이바이나 야 네탄데 지 nguchi 심바이나 야 코텔레테네 펜부용그레스.
And again, just like Kelsey said, we like to give you plenty of opportunity, which is why we also decided to do sort of small-scale presentations at the very end of the last session yesterday, where you gave the 5-minute presentation after you all worked on your beautiful posters on your different types of cancer.
다 단다 겐 캐슬라 소나시레 체슬라 담시 제가 그거 진짜 제가 그 그때와디 나신게 계산이 많이 가서 소탄 담아텔라야 치수 아니 델라야 리모트 지티 콜렌더시 제도 제라야 아니 체슬라야 코 디네 치타바 레레 콜라야 두시요 코 카마 카시라야 코 타트 지야고 코케티 두스 피스.
So what we tend to do as teachers, mentors, is we tend to list even our daily schedule of what we plan to do, with of course the chance that it may change, we may modify it, but at least it keeps us at a regimen of things that we're doing each day with our students.
당아서 기겐치긴 바타야나 지가 mentor system 발아야 람튼 진이기 메치긴 비차네. 내가 그 담보니고 지금 험센 트비값 던터 지그가라 창고 가리가리 요 바당 가리가리 트기 요 발라 소바데 두스 트샤기요스 다코 지 담보더니 드라더니 지치네 지라 시참부드 사바레 지체바이나 양 코티스 디스 지와 주치치 구아틴다 네탄 총그레스 임바이나야 지다 가리가리 지 트기 멘탄 호투술라야 지 가리가리 지 코투 지기 메라 소파 네타 맘푸치라 시샤데타 디두스 카세오고나 트샤이스.
And this brings us full circle then, because we are now working on the bottom there where it says that in the morning session that we would have the review and also time for questions and answers.
당아서 다 고다 양식이 다 담아들 해송스다 단다데가 심바나 다 양식 다 가사양식 아주 꾸레자로 해지로 지송스다 로아 다 담보들에 아주 저정치 용으로 다 단다인 바이나양 아주 단다 버터 가르치다 셔텔라야 저정치체 네 되게 제라야 저정치체데다 네 트와틀렌 지야게데 단다 소탄데라 인스.
And before we open it up for questions, I do have just a little bit more of this document that I want to share with you because it was part of the process of us planning this course.
다단다 체슬라야 드와 타야게 코카테 두스 mambu ngolaya ande olanga shenda chidus khachidus ngotochia yes tade jiati karinsena 당포 ngaranige 던센데라 다디 지야게 그 다디기 차시시 차고요 잔데도 스텐신데 시작인스.
There were several different teaching techniques that we sort of brainstormed and discussed at the beginning, and we did not have time to actually incorporate all of them. So we do have this list here of some ideas that ended up not really being used in the course. A few of them being the 5E model, which I know you covered before, POGL activities, which I believe you also did last year, writing to learn, debate, and then different kinds of case studies, which means it would be some really specific examples of just one instance where something happened.
한다 단데디카 셈바나 가서 헌신 tethabugi ripagangla samlutang ya la thabang kari kari peshe tang yo metila ya samlutang thuching dus koshayos da data chama chi peche tang chong yo mar da imbaina ya ta data gola ya samlutang chi ta dichios ta tangpote imbaina 5e nga dengi pizutires ti chesuge talu dela khashi peche tang sons chesu chajio patires POGL activities ate imbaina nanjelo chesu dus na yores ta ti jelo otela imbaina nga sun dreshin jongwa ta tene dolan chia ta Tani shenda imbayana karsa tanga tsugi pitsun shishe sigura pitsun cheraba chikla tani detang ane netang chika kola ya julun shik chambu chia chigurwa o titala sobati res.
We also made a list of the organ systems just to make sure that we did not forget any.
Na honda de ola yang atsu wampu ko mala kola yang ko tu ti ko shayos ro ate karlana chi khashi khashi san sama shaja chestambala ya tempa jen ro chigurwa ti mayo ya chete ni wampu mala ko tu ti on dus ko shayos.
And the final thing that I wanted to note is just that we did make a supplies list. So this can be really helpful as you're planning your courses as well, just to, if you're able to, kind of think ahead, think about what you might need to carry out the lessons that you have in mind. That way you can be prepared and have all the materials that you need.
Honda dana de shenda de kare system bala zenda de ta trip kapse chesu la ya zenda de trail la ya ani kuchi kare yo me gi ti gi yang thojang chi esra te yo ba de kare system bala ya cherang zenda ti khubi trip kapse kare government nga sasane ta ri chi pa yamba na ne jela zenda system bala ta di yong gor was system bala ya nga chuge ta de thojang de ta ri chi es.
And so I will say it's very important to make a list, because if we forget, if you run a lab or an activity and you don't make a list the day before, you're going to be, what am I doing? Where am I? What equipment do I need? So it's always a good idea to make a list a month before, a couple of months before, to get organized, to make sure that you have all the supplies. Some labs, like the one that we did for photosynthesis, requires specific equipment, and sometimes it's not easy to get it.
Ta de ke chembu chagores ta chegu de pa mbana chegu te drea la ya khuchi kare gugu yo meterwa tana dawa chitan yana dawa nis ko ngola ya ta chi pa mbana ta chi ate ongres ta ti machi pa chi de ta sani chegu de pa na tira alenga kare gugu re se ze ba na yo mari tin zambala ya nga sasani ko ta kare gugu yo pa khuchi ta samaga mintri de ta te ta chi ke chembu chagres ta picha sha pa mbana digna ne ta da nga chu ojo ko kola takse chi ach gorwa ojo kola takse chi ate mbana de ti takse chi ate mbana so the
all of you enjoy the lab activities? Yes. With excitement, yes? Yes. There you go. Perfect. Excellent.
They have this.
Good.
Yes.
Anything else before questions?
I think we're good.
Okay, please let us know what questions you have.
That's just let draw you know some answer. Draw here.
From any topic that was covered throughout the first 6 days.
That other betting as you materials that's for what you know just correct quality na do is draw you know.
Go back to like a slide or something.
Draw the samlana kogo samara. Just color likat is handwa. Draw yeah.
So no questions?
Everyone wants to work on their presentation.
You all know
is that
everything?
What I'm hearing?
Oh, look like everybody knows everything.
Okay, question. From which topic is this?
Get some which is social again. When you talk about the data, the data that you have on a cancer patient about the especially for the man the most cancer is for the lung cancer and the woman is breast cancer. That is global data or
yes,
only in
so
India? Only in India.
Yeah, so it does depend on the source. The sources that I used, if you look at the graphs, it will say, depending on where it came from, it may be global or it may be country specific. I remember I gave you a chart with just India, where it is broken down by men and women in India. And I thought that would be important because this is where you are and this is, the country that you live in. So it would be important to know the facts about your particular country.
That's again, Banach Sugar, and I get period in a thing of becomes Tika tanda thir tin time we kapse ko gang la ya ta bai bai na kari imenti khase utri ores ro ko zechire de yana jag ka sa jak chito pa chigren de yang khasire de utri ores ta ngarang ge te ge tanda ge te piriti bai ma na ngarang ta ta tamba sugu yo bai bai na pecha jaga na nei bai yes te kari ses tamba ya te tia ge jinse kari ses tamba ya ni chorang desa ge jak ta garang na la ya ne netang kan das chago yo me te chento yo ai chete yes.
But you can easily access data sets that talk about different nations or even global statistics to get a sense of what the world looks like.
Ta tanda do ge chichu ge chi tang thu ta ne ta te ha ku ni tu bai bai na ja ke chita ba re te na sing ge je chi ge chi ne ta te ha ku ni tu bai na te ta ke chi tang ka tu ra li lo yo res.
Bula ina de loge ane cancer de shuk chimbo yong ga gimchen gari ni.
Aha. His question is why men have, among the men, the most cancer patients of the lung cancer. What is the reason behind it?
Smoking.
There is
a huge disparity between the sexes. Men tend to smoke a lot more than women do. It could also be genetics. You will have to assess, what genes are associated with the lung cancer. There may be more mutations within the male genotype, but for sure we do know that men smoke a lot more than women.
That's true. Thama thambala tene de tares roa. Tati thama thambala tene de tares is tambalaya pumuli pugi bete thama ma thangi yores. The senda chimbana gasu rigzi deri epigenetics lagda rigzi ki deri kana dese jagores. Tati bana chi tanda migana la ya at mi mas de pugana la chepag na la ya ani gasu rigzi de ta la ya ninjut thaya chorwa ti shuchwa ne tan teong go yores ta loa tan de bege rigzi na la.
Kita ngai draw the guys na tanda seri tanda pina migi ya pyunun ta tanda din drine jindo drine den seri ya ta din drine rin jam ra mombu tanda nyigas ba khago chando chizang tu stand te jang tanda din drine de pina mor ndogo yore mi nolo ra na de rebe ona seri chogi ya yargi shu do che ni karare sena ani tanga dang di rim ra mombu khago ke chere knere de.
So, you have mentioned about about 200 types of cancers, and we see a lot of cases of cancer patient. So my question is: is the cases of the cancer patients increasing, or with the development in the technology,
That's a good question.
We are finding more, or we are diagnosing more cancer patients?
That is a very good question. Globally, I do know some stats. Our health is actually decreasing because we are eating far, so we as humans have a worse diet than we did 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Ta drope apuch dos roa ta tanda de la thela she pai bai na ani chi ta nga su ka su ta ngi teng gi tang thu khashi chi gi du sing gi yus ta nga su dos dro mi la ta chi ke she pai bai na dro mi ge se chu se gora sama sa chi gora ta sama sa ge ne ta te ta lu nyu su sum chi shi chi ta dur bai bai na ti ge ngon ta dur bai na ta ha chen du pu cha yo res.
So even though we're becoming more conscious about the dangers of smoking, and smoking is decreasing through our global population, things like obesity is growing globally. And obesity is highly linked to certain cancer types.
Ta shigin ba na nga su la ya chi jeshi kan she pa ba na chi da thama gi ni chun la ten de ta thama tonye ti ba na tangbo ga chane yong den ru yo res wa yong den ru yo res imba na ya the karsanga su japa cha chu ro chombu cha chu ro chombu cha ge chune ti ba na shu chambu cha go res mant du go res ti ne tan te ti ga ne ta mant du go res ta chombu cha ba na japa cha ba te ya tenne gi ri ta dene gi So I think this is a very good question, and this is a very complex topic that has many factors involved. One factor that I think is related to your question is that with a lot of the advances in healthcare that we have, people are living longer and longer lives,
And as Miguel said, a lot of times in that older age group that people become more likely that they would have some kind of cancer. So now a lot of people are living longer, and so it ends up that they will have some kind of cancer, whereas in the past, it would have probably been some other cause of death.
Again, la somba nanshin re tanda nga su chin dene chong ma chong te jushe mambu chila ra le yo res ro ta tanda nga su jenda chita ba na ta chi thoteng ki ta chong la sopa chi men chu ki ta chong la sopa te yerje chimba la tene de te ngoma tang dro ba na mi chi ko chi rangpo nit ki yo res ta chi rangpo nit pa ba na khesa nga su ta wa de chi rangpo ne ba na ko tela tene ko tanda dene jonga ge karsu sachati chir rug duarwa chirang pade pai banarwa otus du yores ta tichi res ta tanda baina ta ko chirang denye maras tambalaya ko chia ge chechente ta dene ge la tene de ta chigi opagini ta jungo res ta lu mampu ngola sakora ta ko troten ta men chigi ta chonte yapu maybe kapsim bana ko jonjon ka se rus tambalaya ko chichinti ane chigita dene machung go ngong ge chichin jenda la tene chepa tinda ane chigi china ingres ta tanda de so te nga su chirang pola de bala tene de te ane dene yo ati ge ta ko sichate churn duala tene res.
Yeah, and just the last thought is that the healthcare doctors, I think they are always trying to improve their ability to diagnose cancer, especially diagnose it early. So we think that's a good point too, that we are hoping to catch more of the cases earlier, because the earlier it will be treated, then it's much more likely that then the patient will be able to become healthy.
Ya sheda chikare system balaya tinsa imbana ko member mampu chikitanda tose shinju chiage mugi suti kare chigore system balaya ne dene tege ane chi dene te chonwa ne ta nga sasala ya ko chi shiala ya thapsitang yo reswa ta ke ti shiala thapsitang system balaya te gala shuji on system balaya ko ya ta chi dene te nga sasana ha ko imbaina ane tila tani de kola menchu chebaina ko chuni chiage ta chuni chia ta me te taksi jonga ge riwate shi chyo yo ro odin stambala ya kutsuge nga sasane ha ko ya la ya ko thapsi chi yo chang tila tani de ta ya nga sola ya karsugre ta dine ge ne pa mangpu chi yonga chi ro odin tang tin jong jres.
So it's always best to be diagnosed at either stage 0 or stage 1. As you all saw from your talks, survival rate at those early stages is very high. The later stages, it drops to 20, 15% survival rate. So always best to be diagnosed in the very early stages.
20 and 15 or 50, sorry?
15.
Okay.
Depending on the cancer, but
okay,
it can drop to like 20%, 15%.
Okay.
Basically very, very low.
Ta tanda imbana denete yobate chi kete taksi tele hakwa yombana tanda ngasuge denege ramba le kwartang yana ramba tangpo tela ya taksi chile ha kwa imbana yago yores ta ti kap simbana ko ta chuni chiar sukura ta sombu nit kya ge ta chi sachate ha chu thumbo yores ta yabo yores ta ti mai ba chi de ta ti jela ya ramba ta chima khala ya yo pick up sa kwa imbana ta ngasu chi sombu niya ge riwati ta ha chon 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 res ko jachala pa pa mana khashila jacha nyushu khashila jacha juga ma to me patinda nitan yores.
Good.
Tanda yawa shidwa tanda ninju nutrition la yawa shishaswa demen denju dang ngome dang domju la shidwa tanda ninju ina deshibo kangru yin bi chago yore bes tini tanda ngaso cancer chaya gi juju bi tanda ninju dang dewa yin shidwa tilaya tanda deshibo kangru yin bi chaba yonas.
So to be mutation, you have like only need to be in the 4 types of mutations that you have mentioned. 4 types of mutations.
The different kinds.
Yes. Yes.
What about them?
Are the only categories in mutation?
Oh no, there are multiple. There are multiple kinds. Those are the common ones.
Okay.
The other types are a subset of those mutations.
Okay. Also, for the mutations causing the cancer.
Yes.
The mutations can be any subset of the.
Yes, correct.
Litigores Tatani Bana Tanda de la number C Shayate and Eco Casagoreta, Chetanga Yonche Chiwagi, and Eco Yuachitanchi rest, Tetala Yanko Nancy Mampo rest, Ra, Istabalaya, Nancy Mampo rest, Dinanshing and the Yatra Nibati Banangasugi, Dinesh Cheperchiagi, Koya Ninjuga Nabati Banaya, Ko Tandagi Shitaya, Tegi, Nansigi, Yanko Yuaganalaya, Toxibaris.
And just to, I have one thing to add about the mutations, and then we'll hear from Chayang. Those mutations we looked at, usually something like that would be a driver mutation in cancer, and then we would start to see all of those chromosomal mutations, like how we saw that there was way too many chromosomes. And also Gaelic asked a question about chromosome mutations earlier in the week. So it would usually be, yes, those mutations we looked at, that would be that's the start. And then just more mutations would keep accumulating of those kind that we saw, but also much bigger scale ones that affect the whole chromosome.
That under Dela Yang Atsuga Ninjuga number Shabati, Bana, Ninjuran Drua Gita, Kesan Bana, Kalubi Ninju Sestra, that could tamput is Jeperchinitary Segoroa, that tamput Jeperchinitary, that tamput is Jebalataneta, digging Jundis, Takota Ninjuta, not so far, Mampushu Grace, Katsangasu, Tomadansinge Gelege, Dranan Shereta, Ninjur the Dreading at Supongala Dua, Supongala Ninjur Stambale, Seponkore, Mampuchagua, or Tin Nansingetaku Church and Buta, Mampuchagores, this Tambala, and Della Desijajuteta, so data co Ninjurgananeta, Ninjin Dramba Budo Rigdua, or the Chagores. Yeah, that needs that is good. Good
question.
Kila tuwa dawo de shata kasa ninjuru ngazo dene lejera. Ane ta ninjuru theta shigane lego de shed. Indine chik kasa ngen dide do chkoso. Ane ta ninjuru theta de la stop cheje agila. Somebody. Ta odigi ane gyuchene cancel legi de do chik kosra. Kisi de no meva ina and kisi di chene the stop legend cancel by cancel Kurangi, Zavi to schedule some cell overgrowth like that, uncontrolled growth like that. You wouldn't give a check my best.
So if cancer can be caused by any type of mutation, you have to what's the nonsense with the stop? With the stop coordinates?
Yes.
Nonsense, right? In that case, it stops. So in that case, it stops, and then we have like the rest of the protein is not produced. But when we think about cancer, so many cells are produced. So can that be a contradictory in that sense?
So when we think of cancer, we can have a number of mutations all interacting with each other. It's not just a single mutation and poof, you have cancer. That's not really how it works. You have one mutation, as Kelsey just mentioned, leading to another mutation, to another mutation, until you have a number of mutations coming together and interacting with each other, breaking down the cell cycle, breaking down mitosis, abnormal growth, and before you know, you have a multitude of abnormal cells abnormally growing.
Ta dine sate yoyate tange kesela sona shere tako ninjur chila tene de ninjur jenda chon ninjur mampu chila tene de nga sundine tinjungo resta ninjur mampu chon stambala kesanga chu thona sede ani thapong ko khorjing nangla ya ani khoge karsagure no shebata ani thapong chagu ge kapsro nga chu pon chi ge kaps tela ya jebala tene de dus ani dine tinjungo yores.
And the important thing for this would be what gene is it where the stop mutation happens. So yesterday we talked about P53. That's a tumor suppressor gene. So if you put a stop mutation in a gene whose job it is to suppress tumors, that will create the problem, and then the cells will keep overgrowing.
Yeah, the scientific system will ko ni kawala rayo me karsa tanga suge chula sona jen ko ge ta jotsu ko sa ge ani samsen chigora sangda te kawal hayo mela raligres tati kawala raligres system bala nga su rigzila raligres ta picha shapainas khesa nga su ge deshe jabi kapsa ani P53 mbana karese na 10 godira 10 goy chini ge rigzi chirwa ketis the Kugi Karsagores and attending Gopachigo was. KT P53 ganlaya ane ko joksu chikoshana ane ku ngot ko marwas ku cheli te nyam go yorwas ta cheli te nyam bai bai na ko ge ngoy ge chet ngoy ge lekate chi matkistam balaya chaponte kuranta chemete jebal hetene de tans gura chagu jebal hetene nga so tenen jungres that was go tangi da chu senchi
Cancer is very popular,
huh? Yeah,
ngarandu chizo nanglo la da di sha nanglo ni sangda da di tu di ngarandu ani dine kyala ni kye mares.
My question is, you have mentioned about smoking can be a cause of cancer, especially lung cancer.
What?
Smoking,
Yes.
cigarette.
Yes.
Smoking. So my question is, burning incense or the smoke offerings, can that be also a cause of lung cancer?
Absolutely, yes. So anytime you are burning something, well, so let's go back. If we smoke cigarettes, cigarettes have nicotine, and nicotine is a toxin that denatures DNA. It breaks down DNA.
Ta dus against wanga suge ane kuga neta chita against ta nga suge thama tombe kapse ane nga suge da te thama ge juchag na na nicotine sa chores ra nicotine te nga suge da thanji tung yo ra da thama thembi kapse te du gorwa ta khula ya nicotine sa ti je ti gi chechula kar yo system bala ya nga suge DNA ti shiba chinyer wa torba chinyi gi nubati yo res je de la.
So if you burn incense, there may be some chemicals that may act as a toxin, perhaps not the same as nicotine, right? Because you're not directly inhaling it as if you were smoking, but it is still going within your lungs, and it may have a negative effect.
Ta this tambalanga sugar paper wala so pa bana chichi ba bana ya ko na la ya jitin mesi pares ro chichi ba bana ya ko tanda ge nicotine se ge jiti me pa bana ji jenda tina yo se pares ta nga su thama thembi kapsu ko shaja thenchi lo na du gorda du nanshe paper ba me thama te lo na shaja tan du yo mar das themba nanshe du yo mar ya du goro nga su ngumpala tene chichi ba bana ya tige na la yo pi ge jete la tene de tan chunchi se pares.
Does that mean that you have to completely avoid it? No. In my house, back in Atlanta, I have Tibetan incense, and I love the way that it burns and it smells. But I don't do it every day, just because I want to be careful as to not expose my body to too many toxins.
Ta tanda de kapse yang chetsula bete kro chi paper to bete kro samsha gor sigmes ngai bai na pa Atlanta la na la ya ne dus do ni cheju ge ta paper pe tenda yes ro de la ya chi tma da de la ya pe ga yes ta jeti kare system bala ya in ma tak pa programmes ta san sama this chi par ge yes ta ti bai na jeti kare system nga su ge chi ta te ge paper la so pa ge thama te ta nga su ge ngabe te ge chi su ko ta ne tan te ka chu nyonyo ta la thap shi tang ge yes.
I would expect there to be quite a difference in this risk, though, because if you're smoking, right, it's very direct. You're smoking, it is going right into your lungs. And then it would be different with incense, right? Of course, you're not directly breathing in the incense. So I do think, sure, there would maybe be some risk, but I think these are still, I think that there would be quite different amounts of risk.
Tarwa tanda nga su pipa la so padela ya chi nyen kha chi yoba yesi bari da imba na ya chi nyen kha ge chete be khura bit mando res ro nga su ge pipa wanza pipa sha ge ro thama thon se ma sha ja khura lo na tang ge ro as dis tambala ya ko ge ya chi nyen kha yoba imba na ya sta ka pipa te la ya ta nyen kha te be khura chapra chambure is tin chage.
So whatever you do, do not smoke incense. And joking aside, the one factor that really worries me, even myself as a person, is sunlight. I have to be extremely careful with exposure to sunlight. All of us have to be very careful with exposure to sunlight.
Ta tanda ro tela ya chopchilang so ta te phasha bai ban ngarang ni ta mi garching be gane chi samche chate kare system bala ya mi garching be gane nima ge te shaja zu su zu po ga phwa te ro tela ya zab za ton samche chi yes chechu chama nga chu chama ge tela ya ne chi zab za na thna ya yo res ta suro
강아래 세자
ta choinda
ni tiwa de ra tanda kaza ge ge de sungsa kharsa nganzo peer reviewed senge tanda chenke geje sejora geje de Google la yichi ma newspaper la yima chima to ba cheri ke ter to sala yichi tu mar susa news saba cheri gra gra ti de dang anjol cheri ge news saba lore mambo thungda di rasa ge chi traja sonra da ge so na ji khar peje ta ena chi yichi che chosa jora tindi ge thasa ra da tindi yana ane dan de ETSI ge traja jwa ti sul tindi news shasa ji sha to bena ane ge de so ge dino news saba thung di dino lutona ani anjol pe phem to sa res
da tangbo tela ko yichi che samere se ta lokte tang kalas
o di da di ane yo chi te yichi che chosa ge jasa ja to mi de tindi ge chi traja ra yana anjol
so earlier you have mentioned that some of the sources, even for the scientific articles, cannot be reliable. So if you have any recommendations to where to look for peer-reviewed or authentic articles that we can rely on, that would be really great. If you can suggest, or if you can put some of the sources that you use on the ETSI website that can be shared, that would be wonderful.
I can maybe take a stab on. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. So I use peer-reviewed sources a lot in my work. Whenever I create classes or activities, or even when I'm reading journal papers that I use for my classes, my number one go-to site is Google Scholar. Now, there is a distinction between Google and Google Scholar.
That is that anga sugan nanya chapter che bege shinji ko songi sagor wada to su peche tanga ngarang zenta nane zenta la tadichi u kapse nyamshi songi re tani tanda ta kari mugo kari segu yo pai baina ne kasagor ta ko khon setan da bachi segu yo wa ta de sebi kapse ta tampo dosate kari in system balo Google Scholar sa ti yes wa ta tela ya che chapter chi go yo res Google Scholar said it on Google.
Google is a great search engine for anything that we can seek out globally, but you have to be careful as to the reliability of the information that you get from Google.
That's Google Ganlaya says Tabalaya. Chita kari guna nita mampuching asu Google gane ragres wa. Imay na ya chi Google digi nane rabi ne nesuti kanza. The
distinction is that Google Scholar is an academic search engine which unites thousands and thousands of peer-reviewed journals. So you know, anytime you use Google Scholar, the results will be peer-reviewed.
Google Scholar gala taba imbaina as the academics go the academic to skill hotel chemusgo the skill and David. Tetan Drevegi ane nanya chapter chisha jugu somitinda ko sare esra this tambalaya kete chorongo Google Scholar gani ane chi somichi raba imbaina tate koranga nanya chapter chi deta ane pattern chi jugu tinda chagayores.
So when you type something on Google Scholar, let's just say lung cancer.
Yes.
Right? You get a very nice list, literally thousands and thousands of results. You have, 34 of 10,000 results. That's a long list of results.
Tanda Google Scholar gala ya dustaba imbaina zayati ngasu luagi dines lichi seba imbaina kasuchra
And what is beautiful about Google Scholar is that you could even search articles from any given year. You could search from 2024, or you could say 2020 to 24, a 4-year gap, or 2000 to 2024, over the last 24 years. So you have a very nice way of categorizing your search by year, even by author, and you know these are all going to be peer-reviewed.
Google Scholar chana chodit tabdiu yore special Tele Niton Sashi in the Dua, Ketia Chesura Niton Sashi part to go by Manati to take Parotela Sayores, then Anjingian Sombo Puchito Pasque, Treju Sabana to Sayores Ra. That under Dinane Yapuchi Career System, Google Scholar Ganlaya, and a Quesha Judis Homa, and a Nanyan Chapshati Chits Hajures.
So this is really, as an academic, my go-to site. 99% of my sources that I use that are peer-reviewed come from a Google Scholar search.
ta di ba na ngara tapar peche tangsa ge ko taje chag yes ro ta ngarang ge peche tangya ge ane nanyen chashi chiju ge shinji ko soi ke nane jache kuch ko chingde ge nane raju tin yes.
I would definitely agree. Google Scholar is also my go-to. I also use this 99% of the time. And one thing that I wanted to add that I think would be especially helpful for all of you if you're searching on Google Scholar is, well, here it wrote the word review, but if you look on the side here and see it says any type and then it says review articles, a lot of the time, if you're able to click on this and say review, it will give you an article that is a little bit easier to read. It has more of the big picture to give you a good introduction instead of going straight into really, really detailed information.
Ta de gela koron somba de la ya ngara khilen chige ngara ba na ya tanda ge traje de ta jacha kuch Google has to special tang yes drusa dirwa ta de la ya chevi kap se ga la ya ta de na la ga la ya review search to cha shi chi cha ba yin se ge trisha yo wa ta de tu trisha yo res ta ke de trimme pa ba na phajo de la ya chi ge rikari na diga search to any type de ola ya review article la do ga cha shi ge somi search to ga ta chirgin ba na ga la review ti mat na phajo ge review sa te dam ya yo res ta ti dam ba na ti dam sha na chirtang ge kari ong gre sa na tanga su chi jersey shetapa chi ani chichabla ya chi yor wada ngasula chi gi chane ni tang kana da me chi chi go ngoto yapu yoege chitsula chomi tinda ragre estetike ni tang chi kai ke chimbu chagor se stambala ya jersey shetapa chi ga la beta mixse gi shu tanglan juya ge chomi tinda no chansama ngasu loya tang chu chapo tang kan khapu yongor wa te mayong la ya yong ko chila chepi gi jabjon ta ni tang kanza dese janye ge so yo loya yan lil hau ge te this review se diga na yong yores.
And when I was faculty in California, I would actually teach an entire semester-long course on this topic of searching for peer review and finding it. Since I also work on the ETSI website, I think this is a great idea, and I'll get together sort of a little bit of a guide with some good resources, and then I also have a lot of ideas for like some helpful steps to follow. So. Thank you for that idea.
Very good question.
That to be able to songs to the tang to chase tang ngoma para California zenda chitri pickups focus jila ya ani chin zenda kanza de tanda dina ni ro tanda nanye chapse chi chaju gi zomi ti kandas chagi yo me ti kola yan zenda chi dus chi ba yes ta de ke chambu cha re tina sing tanda ba na emet the poch henry leram ge ani tathon ni lobjon chia ge chitane chi zugo ya tatsu chi zugo ro tanda ti ge lekha chi stambala ya de kola ya samno tang chi chi yes stambala ya ne twa de ke chambu re na sing twa ya putang san tu chi yes tasro go
de ala ngala de twa de nanda ala
sabo chi tan te je la ya ne ak tar je inda
ala laso nge di twa de tanda ginge cancer mambo ji tanda nyimi olati ni chongo re son son
ha
tangi te dan de twa tanyin ka jus tronyen to son na ka zana nganda dokba ji cha de ra ka zana nga zu popo momo dos ka zana ani pokum thorga lan sor de chingen cha de ani ti ka la ne khonso ka zana ta ka de na ni ki ri ga la do de cha de ra tene ta na chen ki khonso yang ti shir ko ya tende ki luksu mon do nga de tanyi ma song chou che tende che ne ta mura mambo che la khonso sor do chi do ra yin na nga zu ta sar la ka zana khonso de na chen yo do ta ta sang nga zu chaw chaw mambo chi tong chi na de yo ra khonso sham do da ki tende mambo chi ka wo do da yin na cha mangan do chi lib do yus do chi thong go re tende in za ani nga zu ta sar la ka zana rang shong khori la ka sun den di che yin ani ti chu ka yang na cha nyong an do re tende yin na sam so de ti ga la gin sam sar ka de
So my question is, you have mentioned about being careful going out in the sun, be really careful, and the sun, because of the UV rays, it can be cause cancer, skin cancer, and then other cancers as well. So my question meaning, he's saying, myself is a nomad back in Tibet. My grandparents, they live in the mountains, and they usually exposed to the nature, and sometimes they don't even have upper wear. They just go like that, and they lived a really healthy life, not many illnesses. But at the moment, we have a lot of nephew and nieces. They just take care a lot of the skin of the body, and as we see, they are just prone to many sort of diseases. So what is your thought regarding this?
Well,
and saying that, in my understanding, if we can be more exposed to the nature, we may have a healthy life.
Well, so this relates back to the point of heredity, right? Perhaps your family from Tibet has the genes that has the right type of protection in the skin that protects you better from UV. But no skin is 100% protected. Even if you're exposed for a long amount of time, you can get damaged. So you still have to be very careful.
Yang stichi ba imbana stachi popo mumu kese shang stambala ya tela ya teba imbana stichi na yang konsula tadanga sugi nyima gu ni sonchu chiagi ane ko registi yo separes ra ti yo ba imbana ta nyima gu na ne labar tadanga sugi karsa ti muchi gu ti ra violet muchi gu ti phoba imbana ya kola ya ane ko jacha gi ja sonchu chiagi ni ba de yores imbayna ya rensin de ninjur theba imbayna yang ko ti tela ya chonchia tenda yongres nistamba ta kanda chinyimala ndustamba zabza chigu yores.
And this is true. We also don't want to fill our bodies with all kinds of chemicals in order to protect our skin. There may be some side effects to having all those chemicals within our skin. So I will say, if you have those good genes, great. I'm jealous, but you always have to show prudency. You have to be careful as to not expose yourself more than you are.
Ta chirgin bayna rwa ta tanda chi ketis rwa ta tinando ge ta rigziti yo pain bayna sta nyama ge chi nyama go salatane nom chi ge rigziti yo pain bayna pe ya pores ta iman chogu nga na iman chogu dus imayna yang ta chitang chani bayna nga chu zubo te la ya ta chi zig ta zig rig segora ta nyama go la so pa ge zig rig ka so nyonyo phoya nga chu ge thapsi tangna ne ya go yores te la zabza nang go res. Yeah, that's it tarjinda.
Good?
Yes. Another question.
Delani tadi tinjong ki to jere handi. Tinjong to de ro. Nga to mare ngonjana. Ani gin tinjong karson suna tadi tese ki yen sawos na mundu ta tono chi goyan roche. Ta nga zo ani tunjur sin kadena sondu yores penino ne ro. Telo de kosa ani tadi ki 도와 있는 날에 딱 가리만은 이마 그 위에 있는 날에 가리나 두손은 가서 이 가디나데 포지에도 대동 진리 지와나 가서 아니 돈지 하고 지트로 왔어. 아니 두손 쟁어다 아니 이 나그래 제기를 라야나로 아니 가서 돈지를 지야 그때 고건도 오지 편집 놓는 시에는 체주지 여러. 는 체주대 아니 론도 못 되어서로. 체주대 누가 마다만도 지트는 창도 못 되어서 아니 되게 디선선 도와대 저랑 빈텐션 도와래. 아니 어때래?
그 땅에 그렇게 하면 더 가게.
나이는 너도 쳤네. 땅에 등에 땅에 쳤어.
So my question actually from get tension sitting next to him. So the question is, his question is, so
let me guess, cancer?
Can be anything. So my question, when we talk about evolution, we talk about adaptation. So when we say, when we talk about a lot of things to be careful, to avoid, to cover everything, in this case, are we losing the opportunity to adapt to the current environment and the current situation?
You want to take? I can take a stab. Yeah. So this brings a very important point about how humans relate to the environment.
Tate droke chembures roa ta dela tende de nga sugi dro miti ge khoila ya chi tatan karin zeng yo pa hotela ralik res.
We humans, this is a very complicated topic that you could spend a whole semester talking about.
Ta ko joshi nyokta chau chi res tate la ya chi joshi de ko la nga so twitter chi la chi lop ka kanza chi tan choba ge joshi tinda nyokta chau chi res.
The way humans live is very different from every single other animal out there in the planet.
Tanga su megi tsuni che tanga chiga roa tela taba imbana the school gonna yo big semchin yenda chamali mando chi loga chi chag yores.
We have built houses throughout millennia. We have been able to cover ourselves from sunlight, from rain, from the environment. So one could argue that we may have lost the instinct of our primordial animal self.
Ta yang chikar che system balaya ani karsa nga su imbai na chi ta lu ta ton thong mang bu ngoi ne nga su la ya chi karsa re khamba ta ani chapa la so pa ye ga khamba zo ya ta ani chi ta ye karsa gore ta nyama go ne song kor song che la so pa ani karsa ta ti to chung yo res ta shen da chi imbai na ta ke te tila tene de ta chi chi bai na nga su tambo de la ya chi ta len chi gin du shi chi gorwa. So the
way we have built societies throughout all the different cultures, throughout thousands of years, going from Mesopotamia to Egypt, to Aztec, to Mayan, the way we have built ourselves is very different. And the way we evolve as humans has become quite different from other species.
Payun tarton te la taba imbaina roa ko ge nawu ge payun ni ta ti kanza la taba imbaina chi payun te ta la taba imbaina nga su do mi te ani chi socha ge shenda ta ha chaman ro chag yores.
One really good example of how we have changed our trajectory of how we humans evolved is the appendix, that vestigial organ that our ancestors, the way that they lived and they hunted and they fed themselves, was very different from the way modern humans feed and behave.
Ta chikare system ba tege pichente kare system la ya nga su de la ya julaj to julha dirwa ta julha de la ya ane pichon ya puchi cha yogo chago yores ta nga su tanda gin ro mi ti kora chi chuar ro tang tang chi penjin ro tang de tang de la tene de tang ta nga su ke khala sa tang tang chi ro ta sichu ge ten tang te tang ane nga su ge mebo ngoma mebo yo pi kap su khu su ge sichu ten tang te ya man ro yores.
So I would argue, and Kelsey perhaps may have other insights, that we humans evolve and adapt a little bit different than other organisms.
Da te ka chi kare la go ses nambala ya nga su pen ka sa tunju che tang chi yorwa tunju che tang te nga su ro me te yang chi samchem chenda gi yang tunju che tang man ro ga ne tunju chi yores.
I don't really have any set answer, but I do have something it's more just kind of something to think about because I do understand the point that you're making.
Ta danda de la ya chilen todo chi dire ro chi shea mindu simba na de kola samchi chi shi yens danda chorong ge drwati tang yons tambala ya te ge nangton ti kari chi chorong ge chongu yo bating ha ko ndus.
So possibly, since we as humans, we are able to study, we're able to learn, we're able to investigate, and we're able to find out that there are these different steps that we could take as humans that could benefit us, either ourselves or our communities. Maybe that is even sort of the way that we are adapting, right? Is we're able to use our mind for that.
And do something on my banana, so me, banana, draw me, banana, could Jaya, Lobjon Chiala, the Chiserto Chiala, Sopageti, Nubashi Chambuchi or was. That day by na Chita Tandanga Suga dinner chishim by the school at the court, Senator Trita, Nasula Tenede Tangasuga Serto Chia, the last of a Jante and Chigi open data Segurta. Data thing Arangatatsim Banaya, draw me, Tunjuchi Tangi, Nambachilaya Tongodus.
I agree. At the molecular level, we are still evolving. Just like any other organism, our genes continue to evolve, the alleles within our populations continue to evolve, but the way that humans, our bodies, evolve and adapt is not the same as a wild species evolved in its wild nature.
Ta tanda tu sompati kilenchi gi yesro ta tanda nga su gi tan dromi la imba na nga su gi dromi na tando ya ka su gre dromi na tando penjin ru yo res nga su gi ji thapong gram ba tan didu gram ba imba na tando penjin ru tan rojin ba res nga su gi zupu gi chani su gre ta kanza chi gi ngu chani ta chi kanza ge na gre sopa chi ba na te gi chi penjin ro tang te su gro da te tang tunjin ro tang te ani tanga su gi richi gi sochak su gro da richi soja chi gi penjin ro tang ta tunjin ro tang tan raw yo ma res.
That is a very complicated question and perhaps something that we could touch next year. as to how humans evolve and the difference between other organisms. Very, very important question.
Try apuchi do the ganjokta sauchi do sta chiche by na talu jema by na so draw me gi pension do tanta social agenda gi pension do tan la dur de ta ya chiche by na so ge te gi joshi te gan la lu ji ma chichina ta ge yes.
If you're interested in that topic, I'll do a plug for the QR code to show your interest for future study.
Yes.
That under the trotty Katie Rata did do what you by banning de la Chesulaya, Sherich Tengins, the Sheriti Ganlaya, Karaset Zambalaya, Lujima Chisu, and it's you Johnny Tuag Jushi Kariumete Laya, and it's some Sidiachins.
Very good question.
The two zero. Nakazangi.
Trust you and you.
Kazangi, the Nangaza Gengoche, the cell division chigila, then the telomeres, the Yamguch Maro to Gris. The Digi can be any on the cells in the get to Gris. Then the telomere gun and Yamjip chicken, Chigeko Garu social event, and the Kasikanzo get the telomere, the Yamjip Kaso, Digal research chechi, ko the Yamgudo, the Lake Yoba in a yas, Digi ending also cancer Nasa Pejura, Yongagi Yanga the Shukcher to Gris.
Telomere the Jabaina.
Telomere Yamgudo, like Tuba in a yas. Digging on the cancer in Nazana Yanga Shukcher Tangres. Then the telomere gun and Nobel Prize Raki, Sandivachirida. Odilas, the Dila Danganzogi, that Savada is touched together, Garcina Savana, Telomere Digi. Anzu tapun di pelge de maru tangera. This on the Gazuji pelge maru to Vaina, the guns get the cancer in the mutation chaging in Yungora. The dig is the Tadaji Remaris, and the Digan King Consugaris.
So my question is there's Kolaya Karige Rare, Kolaya medical price Nobel. So my question is, there's a researcher done a research on the telomere that you have mentioned yesterday that the telomere is associated with the aging or the cell death, and that researcher did research to replenish the telomere, and his finding is that even if the telomeres are replenished, the possibility of having cancer is increasing, right? It's increased. And he says, and he said that this researcher got Nobel Prize for this, especially for this topic.
Can you please send it to me, to us? We would love to see it.
So what could be your explanation of understanding of that?
Accruement of mutations. The more replications, the more mitotic stages a cell goes through. Remember, every mitotic stage is not perfect. It is high fidelity, but still a very small percentage of error, while those errors continue to accrue every single cycle. And if the cell continues to replenish itself and it becomes quote unquote immortal, you start accruing mutation after mutation after mutation.
Koge that teacher in Banas, that telomere the Yancheko Chitia get in the chair by Banaya, Dene Chai get Kugo tissue chirdu do sta, Kochong said the future do that Arajas Kesanga de Japan, get the telomere the Kura Yancheko Chetipa in Banaya, Tangasutaba in Banas, Chigi, Tapon Chaguchi, Rambalataba in Banas, Chitanga Taguchi, Tantako, Federal District, Mushin Dawata has a pay Aburis, in Banaya Kula notices Yogores, Tangasut Kesan Tomba Nanshan de Mushi Jishin, and ko Juntis Young Tangasula, Ninju Rita Mayongora, the Yombana, Tilatin de Tangasula, and Dinejo Yakatish to yours.
Oh, yeah, please send us the information. We would love to read it.
Chewa didida chewa do kare sidi sambala tanda nyeshangi di kare sogore seri big tamshi nyemba tamshi di nalo ko kare sigidu lana da tingsa nganzu rize chuju khali ya ane chegi 양튼 슈침부 두고 요르와 아하 디기 양튼 슈침부 두고 유디 삼발라 마옴발라 찍체나 안조 아니 리제큐주기 아니 람네 당안조 로게야 두주 체데 아니 강고 치도다 아니 미시모투에 소토야기 틴데기 고급지 용시바레스 디시기도 제가 디토라 겔라니기 안 틴데 시기 시차 델이야 겔랑 코라니기 공수 가리요나스
So I have listened to a science research talk, and the research is talking about the possibilities of living a longer life, even of like avoiding death by using the more advanced technology, especially genetically modification. So what is your thought regarding this?
So yeah, we have a lot to say about this. I love talking about this.
No.
Everybody do 10 push-ups. Go. As a punishment, go. 10 push-ups. 10 push-ups, go.
Just this, that's how much zero chesa. The lobados bujata chiga zero chesa. Kala yapu nyano chiga mudula da.
That's a really good question.
G.
Yeah. Exactly.
Some.
That's why I did it. You have to be strategic.
G.
So I'm basically going to say it's very unnatural expanding life by 10, 15 years. But there is a limit to how long we can live. And as much as we can expand it, we have to be very careful not to edit the genome.
Taba, that is. Kashi chutambage lekor tangshi tension guju to isar dada.
Good. Now, next time you guys talk, I'm gonna make you do 20 push-ups. All right, joking aside, that's a very... Who was here 4 years ago in my first class? Nobody? Wow. Yeah, it was 2018. So, a huge class. So they probably, yeah. So in one of my very first classes with Sunita, my co-teacher, and I, we would do exercise every single day, and it was actually very good. Maybe next time we'll get to do something like that.
Maybe in this classroom, right?
Yeah, we did it here. I think you were here.
I was here.
I was here. You were here.
I was translating another class.
You were probably in another class, but it was a very over 100 students. Very large class.
Two mabudus tanya chojel zenda tamput tripi kapsi insra gela tanyam tinti kapsel listen yam nyam mampu chiche ba insra be ko yapu shu johnson chiche ba na maum wala ya lise tia dilaya ko nyam chigwa chirendus.
But going back to the question, it's a very, very interesting question, and we have a lot to say about this. As much as we want to think of living a long time, right? We wish to live beyond 100 years, 150 years. And science, he keeps pushing the threshold of human life.
Tanga so imbane tinda samgu yores ta tsirang bu de ala samlo tang yore dwaldu jagel du jara ngachi gela sopa ge samlo chi ti tang yores ro tena singi tanda nga su ge chenri ki takshe ge tumdi la ta ba imbana yang chenri ki yang ku nga su chi karsu gre ta chi tsirang bu de ge sugura ta chema sona ti tint ki yores ta.
If we go back 1,000 years, humans were living to 35, maybe 40 years. Living beyond 50 was really rare. Right, so our lifespan was 35, 40 years.
Tanga sugu tige dromi gi lojina ta ba imbana lu ta chitong do chike ngela imbana ta mi gi chi ta ko chese tel ta ba imbana ta mi sumchonga ta shichu paro tela ya na ko sugu yores.
So in the last few decades, I would say in the last 20, 30 years, we have expanded our lifespan by about 10 years, from 70 to 80 years. And by the way, COVID decreased the global lifespan by 3 years.
다 데비게 로 뉴스um 찍는 라타 바인바나 가수가 셋셋이 미기 셋셋이와 아니 you said 60 to 70 or 70 to 80
70 to 80
yeah 다 테나라야 가수게 지 셋셋이 다 자녀문 쓰고 미리 쓰고만 자녀인 바나 로 든준이 제치치라 파요레스 이만다 단데 니체 좀 비가 가수라에 도에 나살라 텐데다 도에 년라 텐데다 같이 어르스다 발아야 도미기 셋셋이 루승고 말 작사요레스
So my response is great. We are advancing age. As long as we are healthy and we are able to have a long, happy life, I'm okay with it. But we have to be extremely careful not to push the boundary beyond the stage that we begin to suffer.
다 ngaran ka tatsin baina ketis rata nga suge ji chirangbo ji de chirangbo de la deba de la ya chi yang ko zu pu ji thoteng chane ya po ani ko machina la dichitan da ba de do chi baina ta ya go res ta ko chirangbo de thina ya go res na chirangbo tang de ta chirangbo tang la ten de ta chirangbo deba de de ta ya dunge ma pu chi nyang go yo baina yang ko ta de ge yo samares.
So I'm happy there is research that keeps expanding the lifespan of humans, but we have to be extremely careful because there could also be negative consequences that we don't fully yet understand.
다 지금 바나가 속에 지금 심지당 세력 여지를 테는데 미기 세세된도 스린데는 땅거레스. 데 야고도 생각이나 가고도 임바이나 양스와 데 텔라 테는데 타쿠레 진딩 냠반도 종스바레스. 나추 단다 함고야게 진딩 냠바드라와. 데스탐발레 텔라 야잡는 거도스.
First, I would like to thank our new student for asking this very complex question. And it was so complex that we actually had to ask you all to do some push-ups to give us some time to gather our thoughts.
아니, tanga su gishilagera so tu saba te try ya pungye ba sta so se tu chi shi yes ta try ya pu tangla ma tangla dene ngara ni chi samnu ta ya ta trader chi ya che che sa ma le ni ba chi tang che ne paru te la nga so ni trader chi ba yes.
For the sake of time, I'm going to share just a very sort of brief response that I would say is not really an answer, but it's just I'm trying to share a little bit more about sort of how I think of this.
Ta da de la ya ane chi tu tang zhen che che te ko ngarang ge samtsi chi shi instead de sha ja ke chi len yemen da ha ko bu de yim ba ngarang ge samtsi ger ge samtsi chi du she ins.
I think for this kind of issue, I think about it in three different parts. So one of them would be just scientifically with technology, what would be possible? That's the first one.
Ta telaya tro telaya challenges tambala nga su ni tang samla samtang go dusra chiti chenri yerji tang chenri la ten de tang sugro ta tri la ten de tang kar chit kre sa te ne ten res.
I would also be thinking about the ethics of this and thinking about society and what is the impact that it would have on us collectively.
Ta shenda chi kare system balaya nga chuge chi kunchu sigoro wa kunchu ta ane ta chi so to chopa mi gala so pa gala ya kada ro chi tetala ta gundu sta this time balen dina ro chi wala tene dete ta chi chopa ta chi chola ya shuchen kare chi tegre se te samtang gu yores.
And then third, I would be thinking about sort of the motivation. What is the why? Especially for each individual, if we are trying to continually expand the lifespan, why do we want to do that? What would be the goal of that?
Ta sabate karen system balai junsen tela tani tundu sta metet pe korta sesete chirang ta pe ko metet se negin se te imbana tena do chi samlu la ya tena chi chia ge tampo te jusenti karina se tela samlu tango dus.
So as I said, I don't think that I actually have an answer to this, but I do think it's really important for all of us, for everyone to be thinking about this and to be having these discussions. So thank you for raising this question.
That land out ta chi chama so imbana ko jushi ke chambu chi chago yo zang asu sama ge samlu tangwa ta ne samlu tangwa ma se de gang la tudir chi go ge ne ton chi chago dos tin sam le tro te na no tu chis.
Ni dishu tanda ti sambu tro ti da tanda khusu so dilap shara 남진 텔로널에 제동 저도 삼발랑 가서 일마 캠에도 짜고 차되는 연구를 그래서 냠지바 모부지기 데디거나 그저 내지기도 텔로널에 콜라 단진지니 그 레톤데 다다 데이트에 된다 저도 근데 집에 있는 가서 일마 영에도 짜고 차도 메차 그랬어 냠지 수어드네 저랬어 데니 딜라티니다 참봉 담보 차도 삼발라 세월에 못 차그랬어 저 저저 그저 시간 넘버 줘 가서 일마가 서도 짜고 차 딜라 벤저도 그래 되는 거 일합사티 냠지 좀 이되노라
te yalla gore mala gore ale teka te chorong yalla ja gore ale cha ka wanda lan ja ro lan those so he not a question, he is answering his friend's question. The research on the telomere, the initial the goal of the research is to sustain the telomere length so that they can avoid gray in hair or the wrinkles. So with that they can they can prolong the lifespan. So he's just answering his question.
Yeah, expanding lifespan, as Kelsey very nicely put, it's a very philosophical question that we have to really think about. We just have to be extremely careful as to what our goals are and why we want to continuously expand to live to 120, 130, 140 years. The record for a human ever is 122 years old. Why do we want to ever live that long? And that is a very important question that there is no easy answer, but we have to really think about it.
That ro tanda ge nga chu setaran tangaya se chiro wa tim ba na chi nga chu tapta tang de vi ge to chi chag do sta sang shu chen bu tang do sta ke chi shit la ya ta tina ro chi che ge jin sen kari na sra ta setaran tang go ya jin sen kari sta choro ta mi chi ba na setaran po de ge ta den di to ge jin sen kari sta ro ta tanda be 122 right ta tanda ba na tandi chala ya jamlang ga na ta chi setaran shi te ja ta nistan ji sta ro ta nga su tina do chi ta chi deni tugre se ne de la thapsi tang go se te ja lok ta jin sen kari sta o de la sam tang go dus that was some of I'm just asking all questions down. This is now the normal questions.
No more questions. Okay.
Now you need to ask them questions.
You want to ask anything? I have a couple of questions.
I'm just kidding.
Oh. One more.
네 아주 진이나사요. 진이나사도 드네 헤비지지가 나산도. 아하. 디나사 군에 잠바 들어도 상반디 진에 그난 로고요 말.
Diabetes.
네. 저서 에지나사제노. 다 몽우징도 구축 에지나사 헤비지지 다창사나 진이나사 드디 몽보징도. 그래서 진에 그난 로고요.
네, 그거 말해. 네. So his question is, we have like Hep B, hepatitis B,
ABC, right?
Yes, ABC, and then we have diabetes. That's another AIDS.
HIV, right?
Yeah, HIV. Are this cancer?
So that's a good point. So these are viruses. HIV is a virus. Hepatitis is a virus. There are variations with different consequences. But what we do see with HIV, example given, is that it is linked to other illnesses. For example, Kaposi sarcoma, which is an illness, a cancer of the skin, as a result of the HIV virus inhibiting the body's immune system.
Hepatitis says that karimane teche te jela yang asuge HIV yor AIDS de tela sobate ko inya kare system balaya ani nyensin na sares virus ro nyensin teni chongwe na sares imbana nyensin teni chongwe na satela tende de asuge yan dene jonga tende yores picha shaba imbana ngasue tande AIDS yoni HIV yoni S yoni tizula yang chu asuge papa gi dene chinjonga gi ne tande yores.
So yeah, HIV diminishes the immune system. It destroys, not only does it diminish it, it destroys the immune system. And you're open to all other kinds of illnesses, including the emergence of cancer. So that's very tragic.
the pisha shabana HIV and the S de la taba in bannerwa, S de la taba in banner, S Kerchigre system balaya, Nasugi, Nengo Malati, Peti Chuzuris. The Jews in say something like Betukur Sameta Tangrista, Nengo Malati Sameta Tanstambalaya, Sameta Tamalatendeta, Nasser in Dramada Junguris. The Natsan Dramada Jostambalaya and the Natsatinalaya, Dinella Sopayan Jungures.
Very good.
Yes. Don't draw somebody's task. Don't the Gila Ajadi Shadigala, Jedon Roti, Gukion, Chimatisana Chima, Kolazishana Ninjosona. Nichesonata, Kartanaso, Damatingo, Rachi di Galako, Gorum de Chichitan is Zichisona. Dochasona. Don't go to Nichindo, Chimala Jana Chima, Tani Gazana Tani Dochasona. Take a Riga, Nitin Chaju Gilare, Garden. Nitin Chona, the Chicken image of some chicken in Chasona.
So my question is about the one is about the talk maybe you have given or either one of you. One is about Anna's presentation yesterday. One of you put the like order of the genes for tail or head. You put whatever. It has a specific sequence.
The development, right?
Yes.
The developmental stages, right?
And also, you, in one of your topic, you have the antenna or the legs growing out of the head. In that source, you have mentioned that the sequence is random. So, is the sequence random or
sequence of what?
Sequence of the part of the body. How, for instance, you have when you talk about the leg just growing out of the place of antenna. He's saying that when you talk about that, you say that sequence or that the wherever it grows is kind of random. But yesterday, when Anna talks about the fly, she talks about the specific. So, is about something different from the gene or?
Yeah, so this is a great connection, and it's I'm going to answer in two parts. The first part is, so in the fly that had the antenna, that's not random. So, and then I'll explain. But yeah, that's actually, it's not random. The two are showing the same thing.
Okay. Dambuchiko kola chete ngola rachu cheta chi ngola ya kamba chia chgaro ti kapsing ime mares ngi cheres ta ti ta dangon de sja patin chi pares ta ti kola de sja yes.
Yeah, so in the example with the fly, where we saw that it could have the head at either both ends or in the middle, what was happening is it had the signal that was saying, okay, make the head here. So it's not random. There's a special signal saying this is where the head goes.
That dagongi fly score the somebody gala yako go the jigin chalacheta parola chechoro te kasur system balaya te kungi chenes kasur system balaya gondela cheshon so date tangores system balaya ngi chenes.
And then with the antenna, so it is a different gene, but it's the same idea that it's giving the signal saying make the antenna here, make the antenna here. So instead, when we saw the mutation, instead of the signal for the antenna, it got the signal for the leg.
That the Pazotela Chipares, that Nasuke, then the Rizig Chani, Dago de Chapata, any Dambuti Rizig Chani, Rizim Lores, Ratako, take up like Kasugata, Jalola Peshita, Tatachi Paris, Kasugores Tambalayan, Delaya, Sorati Chisho, Sorati Chisho system, but Sorati Taran Chigores. That Tanda Damati Golaya, Rachutsalaya, Kampachia Telaya, Rachuchisetelaya, Kampachisho said that it angiores, Tikastam Telangi Chinchagores.
Yeah, so in both of these, it would not be random. We know what the signal is that would create the head or would create the leg, and so they can modify the organism, and wherever they put that signal, that's where that part of the body would be created.
That they engage in the Taranjares, that they Kasukasur system, Lingichi, Imbadical system, Balaya, Koge. Kampachi setan gochi sege dati kurahakuyores this tambala kusuga dati tangadetan dela kampachi so setan dela yang gochi so stambalaya dus tako dati tambaltene tanda nesamchinti galaya dus chichi dus taksite ditkuresa.
Nothing else. That was beautiful.
Taranja yes. Yes.
Tea time. You guys all want tea, or do you want to? Let me ask you: push-ups or tea? Nah, I think we're going to skip the tea and make you do 100 push-ups. Unless you all pay me, let's see how much.
No. They want to challenge you to do 100 push-ups. I'm just kidding.
Okay, let's go get some tea.
I'm just kidding.